Is the anti-immigration movement in Australia being hijacked by extremists? Thousands marched across the country demanding a halt to mass immigration. But as the crowds gathered, a troubling question emerged. Were these rallies truly grassroots? Or had they been taken over by neo-Nazi and far-right elements hiding behind legitimate public concerns? Organised under banners like March for Australia, protesters voiced widespread frustration over housing shortages, hospital wait times, and crumbling infrastructure. On the surface, these are real, pressing issues affecting everyday Australians. Rising population growth, driven largely by immigration, has outpaced urban planning in major cities. Rents are soaring, public transport is overcrowded, and waiting lists for medical care are longer than ever. For many, the rallies were a long overdue call for accountability, a demand that policymakers address the tangible impacts of rapid demographic change. But while the concerns may be valid, not everyone in the crowd was there for policy reform. As footage from the rallies spread, a deeper pattern began to emerge. Alongside signs calling for sustainable development and border control, symbols with disturbing histories appeared. Raised fists, militarized chants, and flags associated with white supremacist ideologies. Government officials, including the Minister for Multicultural Affairs, issued stark warnings. These events were not just about immigration. They were, in part, organized and influenced by known extremists. One figure in particular drew national attention. A man with documented ties to neo-Nazi networks who took the microphone at the Melbourne rally and delivered a speech laced with racialized rhetoric and conspiracy theories about demographic replacement. His presence wasn't hidden, it was promoted. And it raised a critical question. Was this a coincidence or a sign of coordination? Hours after the rally concluded, reports surfaced of a violent incident at an Indigenous cultural site in Melbourne. Witnesses described a group of men, matching the appearance and attire of some rally participants, vandalising sacred artwork and confronting community members. Police later confirmed that several individuals linked to the attack had also been present at the anti-immigration demonstration. Among them, the same extremist figure who had spoken earlier that day. While no formal charges have yet tied the rally directly to the assault, the proximity in time, location, and ideology sparked outrage. Was this a spontaneous act of aggression, or part of a broader pattern of using public protest as cover for targeted intimidation? In the city centre, tensions boiled over. Counter-demonstrators, representing migrant communities, human rights groups, and Indigenous organisations, arrived to oppose what they described as xenophobic and racially charged messaging. What began as a peaceful standoff quickly turned chaotic. Shouts turned to shoving. Projectiles were thrown. Riot police moved in, deploying pepper spray and non-lethal baton rounds to separate the groups. The violence wasn't just political, it was ideological. It reflected a deepening divide in Australian society, where debates over policy are increasingly framed in terms of identity, belonging, and exclusion. And once again, the question returned. Had a movement born from economic anxiety been transformed into something far more dangerous? Australia is one of the most multicultural nations on Earth. Over half the population has at least one parent born overseas. In cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, more than 30% of residents speak a language other than English at home. This diversity is not a recent experiment. It's the foundation of modern Australia. So when anti-immigration rhetoric begins to align with far-right symbolism, it doesn't just raise policy concerns. It challenges the nation's identity. It forces a reckoning. Are these rallies a legitimate expression of public frustration, or a platform for ideologies that reject pluralism itself? Because when extremist figures are allowed to speak unchallenged at public events, when their actions go unchecked, and when their messages gain traction, the risk isn't just division, it's normalization. So, has the anti-immigration movement been hijacked? The answer may lie in understanding how extremist groups operate. They don't always build movements from scratch. Often, they infiltrate existing ones, tapping into genuine grievances about housing, jobs, and cultural change, then reframing them through a lens of fear and blame. They amplify anger, they simplify complex issues, and they redirect that energy towards scapegoated communities. In this case, concerns about infrastructure strain become warnings about invasion. Calls for planning reform morph into chants about preserving Australian heritage, a phrase often used as code for racial exclusion. When this happens, the original message gets distorted. The protest becomes less about policy and more about power. And the people who show up out of honest concern may find themselves marching alongside those who seek not reform but revolution. Social media has accelerated this process. Edited clips, decontextualized footage, and sensational headlines spread faster than facts. Videos from the rallies, some showing only the most extreme moments, others carefully curated to portray protesters as patriots, flooded platforms. Algorithms reward outrage, not nuance. As a result, the conversation becomes binary. You're either defending the nation or betraying it. There's little room for those caught in between. The people worried about rent but opposed to racism. The parents concerned about school overcrowding but committed to inclusion. When discourse collapses into polarization, extremists win. Because chaos creates space. Space to recruit, to radicalize, and to reframe the debate on their terms. This isn't just about one rally, it's about a global pattern. From Europe to North America, far-right movements have used immigration as a wedge issue, not because they oppose all immigration, but because it's a potent emotional trigger. It touches on fears of change, loss of control, and cultural displacement. And in Australia, where immigration has long been a driver of economic growth, the debate is especially complex. The nation needs skilled workers, international students, and population growth to sustain its economy. But without proper investment in housing, healthcare, and infrastructure, that growth comes at a cost borne most heavily by ordinary citizens. Ignoring these concerns only fuels resentment. But weaponizing them, allowing extremists to position themselves as the voice of the silent majority, is equally dangerous. The solution isn't to dismiss public frustration, it's to address it, honestly, fairly, and without scapegoating. Australians deserve answers on how population growth is planned, how housing shortages are being tackled, and how public services can keep pace with demand. But these conversations must happen in spaces that reject hate, uphold the rule of law, and protect the dignity of all communities. That means holding organisers accountable when extremists are given platforms. It means law enforcement monitoring for threats of violence. And it means media coverage that prioritises context over spectacle. Civil society, schools, faith groups, unions also has a role in building bridges, fostering dialogue, and reinforcing shared values of tolerance and mutual respect. So, is the anti-immigration movement in Australia being hijacked by neo-Nazis? The evidence suggests that while not all protesters share extremist views, the movement has undeniably been infiltrated by individuals and networks with ties to hate ideologies. Whether that influence is growing, and whether it can be contained, depends on how the nation responds. With silence, or with vigilance, with fear, or with unity. The line between protest and propaganda is getting harder to see. But one thing remains clear: staying silent helps no one. Stay curious, stay critical, and keep asking the hard questions, because the future of Australia's social fabric may depend on it. Subscribe for more deep dives into the forces shaping our nation.